Marc Molinaro joins me now. Molinaro is the Republican nominee for governor of New York. Last week on this program, I presented the first part of my interview with the candidate, and we discussed how he's introducing himself to voters, his plans for cutting property taxes, and corruption in state government. That discussion on corruption led to his plans for changing the way state grants are made. We begin today's segment with his response to the question if he will end grants made by state elected officials.
Two or three different things. It's not, I understand that this governor has put that system on steroids. It used to be sort of broad competitive grants resulted in equal access, but that's not how it works anymore. This governor has taken full control of those dollars, billions of them. And to answer your question, I would absolutely end direct cash payments to businesses. I'm all for economic development where there's equal access and broad support based on outcomes with the ability to claw back benefits. But as an example, this governor gave $1 million to Cadillac to refurbish their offices in Soho, New York, when their very vice president said there was no question they were leaving the state. They were never leaving the state of New York. I like Soho, I like Cadillacs, and I would love $1 million. But it's not appropriate to take money from taxpayers and give a direct check like somehow New Yorkers are an ATM for business benefit. It's not appropriate to do that, and that has to come to an end. It does.
Just so people know, Soho is in Manhattan, part of New York City, obviously. New York City elected officials are always saying, and they've been saying it for decades, that the city sends billions of dollars more to Albany than they get back in city services. So will you correct that imbalance?
No, well, listen, obviously much of the income, personal income tax is generated in the city. But what the city deserves is a governor and a government that's focused on providing assistance in those areas that the state has responsibility. For instance, the entire transit system. And I understand, the audience we're talking to. I don't want to bore them with downstate issues, but the truth is the state is responsible for the entire transit system in the city. And we've seen this governor just push blame off onto the city or mayor. Only around when there's a ribbon cutting, but not around during what he declared himself as the summer of hell. And the state of New York has a responsibility to make sure that the transit system in the city is responsive. It's cost effective. It's accessible and affordable to New Yorkers. It's the lifeblood of the entire economy in the city. And by the way, the fact that this state has allowed the transit system to erode hurts the most vulnerable. Those at the lowest end of the income scale are the most impacted by lack or failure to deliver appropriate and effective transit services, public transit. So, for me, it's about making sure the state invests in the areas it's supposed to, and really bring people together, not scapegoat or blame others, but bring people together to problem solve and to confront the challenges that face us.
In your acceptance speech when you got the nomination, you promised to serve only 2 terms as governor. So my question is this: why are you making promises about what you'll do in 2026 when you haven't won in 2018 yet?
I want the public to know how serious I take the need for reforms, and I believe that no governor should serve more than 2 4-year terms. I'm not making a promise if I'm not elected. I'm making a promise should I be elected. And my promise and commitment is this: I will force a vote of the state legislature on term limits, 2 4-year terms for statewide office holders, 6 2-year terms for state legislators, and let the legislature vote up or down. But either way, I will live, should the public provide me the honor of serving, I will live by that commitment. 2 4-year terms, and I'm done.
The most recent Republican-elected governor, George Pataki, said the same thing, but he served 3 terms.
That may be. I'm telling you right now, I've raised my hand, and when I take that oath of office, I'm committed to 2 4-year terms, and that's it. And I will force a vote of the state legislature on term limits. I've not always thought that term limits were the ultimate answer, but in a state government where too few have too much power and cozy up to too many interests, private interests, political interests, powerful interests, and too many ordinary New Yorkers are left on the outside looking in, term limits may be the one way to make clear to the taxpayer that this is their government, and I believe that it's important. So beyond that, independent reapportionment, reforming the procurement policy, ensuring there's oversight, all of these are necessary steps to hold this state government accountable. And at the very least, I think if I'm saying to the state legislature and others that we need to make these reforms, I will lead by example and hold myself to that term limit.
Andrew Cuomo reportedly has $30 million in his campaign war chest. How much have you raised, and will it be enough to get the Republican Governors Association and the big national donors to get behind your campaign?
Well, first, the Republican Governors Association has already agreed to engage in this race. They didn't 4 years ago. We're about 17 or 18 points ahead in public polls at this time than the Republican candidate 4 years ago. But I'd ask you not to gloss over the fact that the governor has an obscene amount of campaign cash, because much of it, I think, has been raised inappropriately so. And I think you used the term before about some of these, the corruption being alleged in the economic development apparatus. I wish I could say it was only alleged, but if you recall, the governor's top lieutenant was found guilty of trading public resources for political contributions. So the fact is that no human being should be able to raise $30 or $40 million. No public official should be able to raise that kind of money or have access to it. So we have a broken system that has enabled too few to consume too much power and to use that in exchange for political contributions. That needs to come to an end. That said, listen, I've never raised the most of anybody, but I will always raise enough to be competitive and win.
If I could ask one more question.
Please.
There is talk that the Democrats will gain control of both the state assembly and the state senate. Of course, Carl Hastie, the speaker, has been around for a long time now, running the state assembly. And if the Democrats take control of the state senate and you get elected the Republican governor, it's going to be hard to get all of this stuff that you're talking about. It's going to be hard to get it done. How will you do that?
Well, first, I don't discount the voters, right? We don't know what's going to happen until November rolls through. So
That's
whatever
true.
it is the voters decide is what we need to live by. But many candidates running for Senate and Assembly today espouse the same and believe the same reforms that I've talked about. So on day one, I look forward. I mean, I think, by the way, every taxpayer deserves a voice, and I don't necessarily believe that our government should speak in only one voice. I think that it is necessary to have Republicans, Democrats, Independents, and everyone throughout the political spectrum seated at the table. And I've always worked across party lines. It's why I've gotten a great deal of support from Democrats and Republicans across my community. So I look forward to that challenge, should that be the way it is. But voters get to decide. Let them decide. But everyone who's running today says they believe in reforms. I'm going to give them the opportunity to prove to the public whether or not they believe that. And that is, again, on day one, whether it's included in my budget or in legislation I forward to the state legislature. We're going to put these reforms out and ask legislators to vote up or down and to explain to the public if they are going to stand by their promises or not.
Believing in reforms, do you know Carl Hastie?
I know Carl. I know Carl. Carl was not Speaker when I served in the state assembly. But again, I think all reasonable minds understand that we have a broken government. Listen, the Democrats in the assembly want certain reforms. The Republicans in the Senate want certain reforms. And whatever party holds control, and I certainly think, again, there needs to be the appropriate checks and balances. Whatever party holds control of either house, there's going to be room for them to prove to the taxpayers if they really believe what they say they believe. I do. And I'm going to force the vote of the legislature on these reforms one way or another.
Marc Molinaro. Molinaro is the Republican candidate for governor of New York. He's also currently the Dutchess County executive. Incumbent Andrew Cuomo is the Democratic candidate, and Cuomo is seeking a third term. Cynthia Nixon is running on the Working Families Party. Stephanie Miner is an independent candidate, and Howie Hawkins is the Green Party candidate.